Chapter 1. The White Hall and the silence that smells of eternity he came to in the White Hall. It was not a place, but a state. Endless, empty, devoid of coordinates. There was no floor beneath his feet, no sky above his head, yet he stood. And this was the only sign that gravity still existed, even if its laws had been repealed along with the rest of physics. The silence here was special. It was not an absence of sound. It was its precursor, thick and dense like nectar, smelling simultaneously of the rust of old stars and the freshness of the first rain. On a new planet, the air, if it was air, vibrated with an inaudible hum, as if a giant mechanism of the universe was working somewhere, and this was merely its echo. He looked at his hands. They were his hands, the very ones he remembered. But when he tried to remember his name, only a short, bright flash went off in his head. Trainee. Not a name, a label, a tag. The first time is always impressive, a voice sounded. The trainee turned sharply. A man in an impeccable ivory-colored suit stood nearby. His face was impossible to remember. It seemed woven from light and shadow, changing with every moment. Only the eyes were memorable, old, tired, all-seeing. The eyes of a librarian who had read all the books in the infinite library and was no longer surprised by anything. Where am I? The trainee squeezed out. His voice sounded muffled, as if absorbed by cotton. In the antechamber, the stranger answered. The waiting room, a place where souls await inventory. I am the keeper. I died. The keeper smiled softly, and his smile held something of the rustling of pages. Death is too loud a word for such a subtle process. You have completed an incarnation, handed in a project called Life 283, and now it is time to take stock, check the blueprints, and compile a report for yourself. He made a light, almost weightless gesture with his hand, and a table emerged from the whiteness before them. Ancient oak, covered in ink stains and scratches. On it lay a stack of papers covered in small, cramped handwriting that flickered like fireflies. What is this? Asked the trainee, feeling a non-existent heart begin to beat in his airless body. These are your contracts. The keeper placed his palm on the stack. Fundamental agreements that your soul made with itself, with other souls, and with the very fabric of being before going down. The terms of your embodiment. Chapter 2. Ink from stardust and promises made in dreams. The trainee looked at the papers with distrust. They smelled of time, not years or centuries, but something greater. They smelled of cooling plasma, dust from moth wings, and the bitter smoke of burnt bridges. I didn't sign anything, he muttered. You did, the keeper objected. Not with a hand, but with intention. Not with ink, but with the quintessence of your eye. Look. He handed the trainee the top sheet. It was heavy, like a stone slab, yet almost weightless. The heading, written in shimmering letters, read, Basic Karmic Embodiment Protocol No. 7G283. The trainee began to read. His eyes ran over the lines, and with each word, fragments of his life flashed in his memory. Clause 1.1. Condition of arrival. The soul agrees to be born into a family system burdened with karmic debts on the father's line, for the purpose of working them off and transforming them through acceptance and forgiveness. His father rose before his mind's eye, eternally dissatisfied, cold, a man fortress behind whose walls no one lived. He remembered arguments, silent dinners, unspoken reproaches, and his own hard-won decision not to be like him, to destroy that wall, to work off the debt. Unfulfilled, the keeper said quietly, and his voice sounded not like an accusation, but a statement of fact. You did not accept him. You only fought his reflection within yourself. The wall remained. A chill ran down the trainee's spine. He moved his gaze to the next clause. Clause 2.4. Key encounters. Ensure intersection with soul companion Lyra incarnation identifier. Elena. Between the ages of 25 to 27 Earth years for the joint passage of the lesson of mutual growth and overcoming the fear of intimacy. Elena. Her face surfaced before him with painful clarity. That very meeting that turned everything upside down. Years of happiness followed by slow drifting apart, arguments, misunderstanding, and his flight. He left because he was afraid her love would consume him, that he would lose himself. He broke the contract, not even knowing of its existence. Early termination initiated by one party, commented the keeper. A complex case. Entails a revision of all subsequent karmic chains. The trainee feverishly sorted through other sheets, each one a new wand, a new unlearned lesson. Addendum 4.12. Lesson of creativity. To manifest the inherent creative potential through the art of the word, despite the lack of external recognition. He had abandoned writing his novel after the 10th publisher's rejection. Health Protocol 3.0. To maintain the temple of the body in a state of balance, using illness as a signal, not a sentence. He had drowned stress with pills and alcohol until his body rebelled with a serious ailment. He flung the sheets away. They scattered across the white void like frightened birds. "This is hell," he shouted. His voice finally found strength, the strength of despair. "It's some kind of infernal report. Who came up with these stupid rules? I didn't remember any of this. How can you demand the execution of a contract you weren't shown?" The keeper looked at him with bottomless calm. "Memory is erased intentionally, trainee. Otherwise, what is the point of an exam if you have all the answers? The point is not to blindly follow the clauses. The point is to find the strength in the darkness by touch, to act as you yourself, at the peak of your wisdom, once decided for yourself, to remember your own will." He picked up one of the fallen sheets. "You see only letters, but I see energy." Here, he ran his finger over a line, and it flared with a dull, sickly red color, a rupture, an unfulfilled obligation. And here, he poked another paragraph, and it splashed with bright, pure gold. "You exceeded expectations. You didn't just fulfill the clause about helping a stranger. You gave him hope. You built an entire bridge where the blueprint only had a shaky crossing." The trainee looked at the shimmering lines. Anger slowly gave way to amazement. This was not accounting. This was a poem about himself. Tragic, imperfect, but his. "And what now?" he asked quietly. "Will I be judged?" "The judge only needs your own gaze in the mirror," said the keeper. "And now look at the most important thing." He set aside the stack of written sheets and pulled out from under the table a single, completely blank sheet. In its corner shone the same emblem that was on Alice's key, 3 intersecting circles. The primary soul contract, the one more important than all karmic protocols, the one you conclude not for the time of one life but for eternity. The trainee looked at the blank sheet. "But there's nothing on it." "Precisely," the keeper nodded. His eyes flashed like distant quasars. "It is not yet written. Everything you saw before this was tactics, specific assignments, and this is your strategy, your highest intention, that for which you come again and again at all. And now it is time to formulate it." The keeper handed him a pen. It was carved from a comet fragment, and its tip emitted a soft, phosphorescent light. "Inventory is complete. Reporting is behind. Now, trainee, it is time for a new agreement. Right? What do you want truly?" The trainee took the pen. It was icy and burning at the same time. He looked at the infinite whiteness around, at the abyss of his mistakes and a few lonely, but bright victories. He brought the pen to the pure paper, and in the silence, smelling of eternity, the first word was born. The pen in the trainee's hand froze a centimeter from the virgin surface of the sheet. The glowing tip cast reflections on his fingers, which suddenly seemed alien and helpless to him. "I don't know what to write," he admitted, and his voice sounded childishly weak in this eternal whiteness. "I want to be happy." Sounds like a click from a bad novel. "I want to correct mistakes, but that means looking back again." The keeper watched him, his hands folded. His figure wavered on the edge of perception, one moment acquiring the clear features of an elderly archivist, the next dissolving into a shimmering silhouette. "Because you are looking for the answer outside," he said. His voice was like the whisper of pages in a giant library. "You are trying to guess which word will be correct. There will be no more evaluation, trainee. There is only consequence. The word you placed here will become the foundation of your next great construction site, your life. It will determine the gravity of your soul, the chemistry of your encounters, the architecture of your falls and ascents. One word can determine everything. One seed determines what the forest will be. One note sets the tone for the entire symphony. You don't remember, but last time your word was understanding, and your life became a field for honing that tool. You attracted teachers and students, situations requiring penetration to the essence. You suffered from misunderstanding and soared in moments of insight. The contract was fulfilled brilliantly, though painfully. The trainee looked at the empty sheet. Everything inside him tightened. Responsibility pressed harder than any earthly burden. And if I choose wrong, right is an illusion. There is only choice and its echoes. You can choose love and go through the hell of jealousy, self-denial, and loss to ultimately learn its true, impersonal nature. You can choose strength and learn all the bitterness of loneliness at the top, until you realize that true strength lies in softness. The task is not to avoid suffering. The task is for suffering to have meaning and joy depth. Suddenly, the whiteness around them shuddered. The air trembled like a giant curtain in the wind, and for a moment it seemed to the trainee that he could see through it the ghostly outlines of other such white halls, and in them other lonely figures bent over their tables. "We are not alone?" he asked in surprise. "The antechamber is infinite, as are the souls passing through it," the keeper explained. "Sometimes their paths cross," and as if in response to his words, the space to their left thinned, becoming like frosted glass. Behind it, the figure of a woman appeared. She sat with her head in her hands, and before her on the table lay her own contract, covered in fiery script. A wave of despair emanated from the woman so strong that the trainee physically felt a coldness in his chest. What's wrong with her? Her primary contract was unconditionality, the keeper said quietly. She strove to give and receive love without conditions, to trust the world without looking back, and she was embodied in a world built on contracts, manipulations, and fears. She opened her soul again, and each time she was wounded. She considers her contract unfulfillable, a curse. She does not understand that her very pain is part of the alchemy. She stood in the fire but never allowed it to purify her, only getting burned. The vision began to disperse, the woman disappeared, dissolving into her personal purgatory. Then the space to the right thinned again. This time they saw a young man who was furiously beating his fists on his table. His contract blazed with a scarlet, angry light, and his word was freedom, the keeper continued. He hated any framework, family, society, even his own body. He rebelled, ran away, destroyed. He never realized that true freedom is not in the absence of restrictions, but in the conscious choice of those that serve your highest purpose. He tried to burn all the cells, not understanding that the key was inside him. The trainee looked first at one vanishing figure, then at the other. His own problems suddenly seemed petty and academic to him. He was a trainee. They were masters, lost in their own grand narratives. Do they need help too? Can they talk to each other? The rules do not forbid it, but few dare. Every soul is locked in its own crystal of awareness. Only an impulse of the same strength, but of a different frequency, can break through its walls. Compassion devoid of pity, love devoid of attachment. Suddenly, the trainee felt a strange impulse, a warm wave emanating from his own, still unwritten contract. He looked at the pen in his hand and realized he could not write, could not focus on his choice, while these two were somewhere nearby, breaking against their own wings. "I want," he began and faltered, searching for words. "I want to try, to help them, not to fix them, but to I don't know. To simply remind them, like you did for me." For the first time, the keeper looked genuinely surprised. The flickering of his form slowed down. This is a non-standard request. Usually, souls are focused only on their own report. Your choice is already beginning to shape reality, trainee, even before you have laid down the first word. How can I do it? Extend a thread, not physically, with intention. You have seen them. You have felt their pain. Now imagine that the space between you is not emptiness, but a conductor, and send through it not advice, not consolation. Send a simple awareness. You are not alone. Your contract is not a verdict, but a melody. And maybe, just maybe, you are singing it in the wrong key. The trainee closed his eyes. He discarded attempts to think something up, to formulate. He simply remembered the woman's face distorted with pain, remembered the young man's rage, and then, in the silence of his heart, he simply acknowledged them, acknowledged their right to such pain, to such anger, without judgment, without the desire to change anything in them. He imagined sending them not a beam of light, but a quiet, brotherly, "I see you, and your battle has meaning." He did not expect a result, but he felt a response, a weak one, like an echo. First from the side where the woman was a barely perceptible sensation, as if the icy shell round her had given the thinnest crack. Then from the young man a short pause in his powerless rage, as if he had listened for a second to something unfamiliar. Nothing had changed drastically. They were not magically healed, but the tension in the very fabric of the antechamber eased slightly. The trainee opened his eyes and met the keeper's gaze. Something new shone in those ancient, all-seeing eyes' interest. "So, The keeper whispered, "You have not yet written your contract, but you have already begun to fulfill it. An interesting move." The trainee looked at the blank sheet again, and now something shifted inside him, as if a stone blocking the flow had been removed. He no longer thought about the right word. He thought about what was truly close to him, about what was born from the very act of this silent communication with other lost souls. He took a deep breath and firmly lowered the pen onto the paper. The glowing ink lay evenly, spelling out the first main word of his new eternity. Connection. At the same moment, the three intersecting circles in the corner of the sheet flashed with a dazzling white light. The table shuddered. The whiteness around rang like a crystal bell. The keeper nodded slowly, and for the first time, something resembling a smile appeared on his face. "Congratulations. You have just signed the most complex and most beautiful of all possible contracts. You are about to know connection in all its forms, from the merging of souls to the bitter loneliness. That is also its part. You will attract people who will need your thread, and you yourself will need others. You will learn that any war is a severed connection, and any healing is its restoration." He took a step back, and his figure began to dissolve, becoming transparent. "Where are you going?" the trainee asked, frightened. "My work with you is complete. You have made your choice. Now the door is open." The door to where? Back. But into a new story. The story you have just begun to write. Remember, a contract is not a plan. It is an intention. The universe will throw challenges at you, testing how deeply you understand the meaning of your word. And the keeper's voice became almost inaudible, an echo. "You are no longer just a trainee. You may be called a conduit." The whiteness around the trainee began to condense, twisting into a vortex. He felt himself being pulled down, back towards the familiar hum, the beating of a heart, the heaviness of flesh. The last thing he saw was the blank sheet with a single word: connection, burning like a beacon in a boundless ocean of possibilities. And the last thing he heard was the quiet, fading voice of the keeper, "And be ready, your first student is already waiting for you." Excellent. The story continues. We dive into the new incarnation of the conduit. Book 2, Flesh and Wires, Chapter 1. Return to the noise. His consciousness crashed into reality with the slam of a door and the screech of brakes. He was sitting in a stuffy subway car, his forehead pressed against the cool glass. Blurred shadows of the tunnel flashed past the window, and then his eyes were struck by the blinding light of the station's advertising boards. His body was heavy, alien, saturated with fatigue. A hum filled his ears, woven from the screech of wheels, the whisper of strangers' conversations, the beating of his own heart. Mark. "My name is Mark," flashed through his head like a pop-up window on a screen. Mark Volkov, 32 years old, design engineer, returning from work. He squeezed his eyelids shut, trying to hold onto the remnants of that serene, all-encompassing knowledge from the white room. Only an echo remained, a feeling of the immense importance of something he had forgotten. And one word burned into the very depths of his memory: connection. Next, Ploshchad Voston near Rebellion Square, the speaker droned. The car jerked, and someone in a hurry bumped his shoulder. A fleeting touch, and suddenly he felt, not just physical contact, he felt a burst of nerve impulses, haste, irritation, a vague anxiety about an iron left on. It lasted a fraction of a second, like a flash of lightning illuminating someone else's inner landscape. Mark recoiled, pressing himself against the glass. What was that? Empathy? Overwork? He closed his eyes, trying to recreate the state in which he had sent the mental thread to the woman and the young man. In the antechamber, silence, acknowledgement, without judgment, and then he felt it again. But now not from one person, but from everyone at once. The car turned into a deafening symphony orchestra where each passenger was their own instrument, playing their own chaotic, discordant music of feelings. Fatigue, boredom, anticipation of a date, the bitterness of a quarrel, dull stupefaction after work. This onslaught crashed down on him, oppressive, chaotic, unbearable. He groaned, grabbing his head. This was not a gift, it was torture. His contract was coming into force. Chapter 2. The first student. The apartment turned out to be a small, standard two-room Khrushchevka type of Soviet apartment. Everything in it was gray, faceless, as if life here had not yet truly begun. Mark turned on the light, and his gaze fell on a bookshelf. Among the technical literature stood several worn volumes: Quantum Psychology, Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, the Language of Symbols, an echo of his soul's interests, not yet suppressed by his engineering education. He went to the window, looking at the lights coming on in the high-rises. Millions of lives, millions of contracts, and he, Mark, the conduit, had to somehow make sense of it all. Where to start? The doorbell made him flinch. He wasn't expecting guests. A girl stood outside the door, about 25, dark hair pulled into a careless bun, large eyes swirling with a mixture of determination and panic-stricken fear. She was pale, as if she hadn't slept for several nights. Mark Volkov. Her voice trembled. Yes. And you? My name is Lika. I was told you could help. Who told you? Mark became wary. I don't know. Just a voice inside. It said, "Fine, Mark. He is the conduit." It sounds crazy, I know. She glanced nervously into the empty hallway. But I can't take it anymore. I'm losing my mind. Mark froze. Your first student is already waiting for you, so that's how it works. Not through newspaper ads. He let her in. Lika nervously fiddled with the edge of her jacket, her emotions hitting Mark like a shockwave, a whirlwind of fear, despair, and some frantic hope. What's happening? He asked, trying to speak calmly, needing that calmness himself. I hear thoughts, she blurted out and immediately shrank, expecting ridicule or a call to the mental hospital. But Mark just nodded. For a man who had just returned from the antechamber, this was not out of the ordinary. Whose? Everyone's? Her voice broke into a cry. In the metro, in the store, at work. It starts suddenly, like someone turns on a radio in my head on all frequencies at once. I can't sleep. I can't think. I'm going crazy. She burst into tears. Mark felt her pain as his own. It was the same chaos that had assailed him in the subway car, but she had no filter, no understanding of what was happening. He approached her and, obeying an unconscious impulse, placed a hand on her shoulder, not to comfort, but to stabilize, to create a point of support. Breathe, Lika, he said, and his voice sounded with an unexpected authority. You are not going crazy. You just opened a channel you can't control. He looked into her tear-filled eyes and suddenly saw not just a girl. He saw her energy structure woven from thin, hypersensitive threads that were torn and fluttering in the wind of someone else's psychic chaos. Her gift was her curse because she did not know the first rule of the conduit. You are trying to listen to everyone, Mark said. It's like trying to drink the ocean. You will drown. You need not to listen. You need to tune in. To what? She whispered, looking at him with a hope he now felt as a warm light. First to the silence within yourself, and then to one person, with the intention not to hear their thoughts but to understand what they feel. Thoughts are superficial noise. The essence is in the feeling. He set her down on a chair and sat opposite. Close your eyes. Breathe. And imagine that your consciousness is not a shell catching all waves but a lighthouse. You radiate calm, and only what resonates with your own intention will come to you as a clear signal, not a cacophony. He guided her, not yet fully understanding where these words were coming from. The keeper's knowledge was slowly seeping through the layers of his new personality. Lika breathed, her shoulders gradually relaxing. Panic receded, replaced by concentration. And if I hear something terrible, you are not a judge, Lika. You are a conduit. Your task is not to change someone else's melody, but to help it sound a little clearer for the person themselves, or simply to acknowledge its right to exist. Sometimes that is enough. That evening, Mark found no answers for himself, but he took the first step in fulfilling his contract. He restored one broken connection, Lika's connection with her own gift. And for the first time since returning, the chaos in his head receded slightly, giving way to a new, strange feeling purpose. He walked Lika home, and at parting, she squeezed his hand. Thank you. I will learn. When she left, Mark remained standing in the cold night wind. He looked at his hands. They no longer seemed alien to him. They were a tool, and somewhere deep in his soul, faintly but distinctly, he felt a new call, a different one. This time full not of pain, but of a dull, compressed fury. A fury that was about to find an outlet. His second student was approaching. Absolutely agree. It's important to show how the connection contract doesn't just give a superpower, but fundamentally changes his life, creating new plot lines and conflicts. Let's weave this into the narrative. Chapter 3. Echo in the silence. Mark's life split into before and after. Before were the gray, predictable days of engineer Volkov, whose world world was limited to blueprints, the metro, and lonely dinners in front of the TV. After it became like trying to conduct an orchestra without knowing the notes, where every instrument was someone else's soul, and he himself was a deaf maestro learning on the fly. Work became his first testing ground, a meeting with a client. Before, he only saw their requirements and his calculations. Now he sat opposite the director of a construction firm, a man with smooth, confident gestures, and felt him the sticky, cold fear of failure, the crushing burden of debt, the false bravado hiding uncertainty. And Mark, instead of arguing about deadlines and estimates, unexpectedly said, "Ivan Petrovich, I see you're concerned about the foundation's reliability given the high water table. We can work on an additional drainage circuit. It will increase the cost by 5%, but give you a 100% guarantee." The client froze, his mask of confidence wavered. He hadn't spoken his secret fears aloud, but Mark had caught them, read them between the lines of his tension. Instead of confrontation, he offered a solution that hit the mark perfectly. The deal was closed the same day. Mark's boss was in shock. This was not a calculated move. It was the first conscious act of connection. He wasn't reading thoughts, he was reading the essence. And reality responded. But everything has its price. His own apartment, once a quiet den, was now filled with the whisper of other lives. He caught echoes of an argument from the neighbors upstairs, not words, but whirlwinds of resentment and disappointment. He felt the lonely melancholy of the old lady on the first floor, like a heavy, cold stone in his own chest. He learned to set up internal shields, mentally imagining himself inside a crystal that lets in light but not noise. It required titanic concentration. Lika became his first anchor in this chaos. She came to him every evening, and they practiced. They sat in silence, and Mark taught her not to switch off, but to tune in. Like a radio, not to drown out all waves, but to catch one, the most important one. Her panic gradually gave way to amazement, and then to a deep, reverent understanding. "He's just afraid," she whispered one day, after reading the mood of a gloomy barista in a coffee shop. "Afraid he'll be fired, and that's why he's so rude." At that moment, Mark saw how his contract worked. He wasn't just helping Lika. Through her, stabilized and confident, he himself understood the world better. Their connection strengthened them both. Chapter 4. The voice of rage. The second call came as Mark had, through a wave of blind, uncontrollable rage. It caught him at the gym. Mark was trying to burn off the remnants of his mental tension on the treadmill when a guy burst into the locker room. Large, muscular, with a face distorted by malice. He threw his sports bag with such force that it hit a locker with a deafening clang. "Humiliated me, in front of everyone. I'll kill him, kill him." The guy's thoughts slammed into Mark's consciousness not as words, but as a clenched fist. It wasn't just anger. It was a black, suffocating vortex of humiliation that sucked in all other feelings. Mark knew this was him, the second one. He approached him, trying to radiate calm, as he had taught Lika. "Problems?" The guy turned sharply, his eyes hollow with fury. "Piss off." A wave of aggression hit Mark physically, but he stood his ground. He didn't try to penetrate his thoughts deeper. He simply acknowledged this rage, accepted it as a fact without judgment. "Looks like you were really hurt," Mark said quietly. His voice was even, like the surface of a lake. The effect was stunning. The guy's rage, meeting no expected resistance or fear, stumbled for a moment. He looked at Mark with bewilderment. You don't understand anything," he hissed, but without the former force. "Perhaps, but carrying something like that inside," Mark pointed to his clenched fists, "is like carrying a grenade without a pin. Sooner or later it will explode, and it will kill you first." He turned and walked away, leaving the guy in thought. He didn't offer help. He simply showed him his own reflection at the moment of explosion. It was the first, heaviest thread, the thread of confrontation with oneself. The next day, this guy, whose name was Artem, found him at the metro exit. He was calm, but his energy gaped with emptiness, as after a storm. Yesterday, he didn't know how to formulate. "You said something, and it was like a switch flipped in my head. I almost did something stupid." "And what happened?" Mark asked, already knowing the answer. "The coach, at my training, called me a prop in front of everyone. Said I fight without heart." Mark nodded. The problem wasn't a lack of heart. The problem was a giant, unhealed wound of self-esteem that the coach had touched, accidentally or intentionally. Artem was that very young man from the Antechamber whose word had been strength, and he still understood it as brute power and dominance. Now Mark had to. Sensitive Lika, picking up the subtlest vibrations, and explosive Artem, whose strength was so far directed only at destruction, primarily self-destructs. Their trio was strange, discordant, but in this dissonance, a new music was born, the music of connection. Mark understood. He wasn't just helping them, he was learning himself, going through his own lessons through their reflection. His personal contract was being fulfilled not in the silence of meditation, but in the thick of human passions, pain, and search. And with anxiety and anticipation, he waited for whom the thread of fate would bring him next, because he felt the most difficult connections were still ahead, those that stretched from his own past, from contracts he had once failed to fulfill. Excellent idea. A romantic line will not only enrich the characters but also become a powerful catalyst for plot development and testing Mark's contract. Let's weave it in organically. Chapter 5. The silence between two hearts, a strange metamorphosis was happening with Lika. Her panicked fear was replaced not just by control, but by a deep, almost mystical understanding of the world around her. She learned not just to filter noise, but to tune into individual stations, to the joy of a child in the park, to the creative uplift of an artist drawing on the embankment. Her gift was turning from a curse into a tool of cognition, and as her confidence grew, so did her attitude towards Mark change. The gratitude of a student to a teacher gradually dissolved into something warmer, more tremulous and complex. She saw his fatigue after days spent in a sea of others' emotions. She felt his loneliness, which was deeper than just a lack of company. It was the loneliness of a sentry on post who cannot share his watch with anyone. One evening, after a particularly exhausting session with Artem, who had barely restrained his anger at the gym, Mark sat on his sofa, staring at the wall. He was empty, like a wrung-out lemon. Lika brought him tea and sat down next to him. Without a word, she took his hand in hers and did what he had taught her, not to break into his thoughts but simply tune into his feeling. She sent him not words of comfort but a quiet, warm echo of his own calm that he had once given her. It was like a gulp of pure water in the desert. Mark shuddered and looked at her. There was no pity in her eyes. There was understanding, and something else. He reached out and touched her cheek. It was not a passionate impulse, but a slow, almost hesitant movement, as if he were checking the reality of this moment. Her skin was cool, but life pulsed beneath it, bright, pure, so different from the chaos he felt all day. Their first night together was not a stormy passion, but a deep, almost ritual union. It was not just physical intimacy. At moments of highest intensity, when their bodies merged, their consciousnesses also touched, creating a closed circuit. Feelings flowed between them, amplifying each other. Mark's fear dissolved in her trust, her residual doubts burned up in his sudden, vibrant confidence. It was the most complete connection he had ever experienced, physical, emotional, psychic. The next morning, the world seemed different. The silence in his head was not empty, but filled with her presence. She became his living shield, his grounding. When someone else's agony washed over him, it was enough for him to mentally reach for the image of Lika, for the sensation of her calm breathing in her sleep, and the storm would subside. She moved her things in almost imperceptibly. First a toothbrush, then books, then a modest wardrobe. His faceless Khrushchevka began to slowly come to life, filling with her light, slightly anxious, but so familiar aura. Yes, you are absolutely right. I made a mistake confusing the universes. That's my fault. In our novel's soul contracts and agreements, there is no Alice or architect from Quantum Architect. This is a completely separate story. Let's correct this and continue our original plot with Mark, Lika, and Artem, discarding this erroneous appearance of Alice. This will make the story much more cohesive. Chapter 6. Echo of a locked door. It was this new stability with Lika that allowed Mark to discern the next, much more complex thread. It was old, thick, and carried the bitter aftertaste of an unfulfilled duty. It was not a connection with a specific person from his past life, but something more profound and unfinished. Karmic knot that now, after signing the new contract, began to vibrate with renewed strength. He felt it in a crowded shopping mall, amid the whirlwind of purchases, laughter, and fatigue. He caught a foreign yet naggingly familiar energetic signature, a dull, compressed rage, very similar to Artem's but much older, rusted through, as if locked in an armored room, and along with the rage a heavy, suffocating wave of guilt. Mark froze, scanning the crowd. His gaze fell on a man in his 50s who was choosing coffee at the same stall. He was dressed in simple but quality clothing, his posture straight, almost military. But his shoulders were slightly hunched under an invisible load. Such a powerful wave of self-loathing emanated from him that Mark almost felt sick. "Mark, what's wrong?" Lika, holding his hand, immediately felt his change. Her own sensitivity, now heightened by her closeness to him, reacted instantly. Over there, Mark barely nodded towards the stranger. "Seems like Artem, only 10 times stronger and more bitter." Lika frowned, trying to tune in. Ushi winced. "It's like a dormant volcano. He hates someone, or himself." At that moment, the man raised his head and his gaze slid over Mark. There was no recognition, no interest. It was an empty, scorched feel. But in the depths of those eyes, Mark saw for a second what he had once seen in the antechamber: the distorted face of the young man, the one who had been beating his fists on the table. The energetic imprint was the same, only aged and crippled by years. The man turned sharply and walked away, his aura receding like an armored tank, leaving a trail of scorched earth behind. Mark stood thunderstruck. His new contract was confronting him not with ghosts from his personal past, but with other lost souls like himself from the antechamber. Only this man seemed to have never found his keeper, or found him but failed to accept his lesson. His freedom had turned into eternal shackles of self-torment. "You have to go to him," Lika said quietly. Her hand squeezed his palm tighter. There was no fear in her voice, only determination. "I can't just approach him. You felt that. He'll smear me on the asphalt. You taught me that connection is not about a head-on attack." She looked at him, and her eyes shone with an understanding that hadn't been there a few weeks ago. "It's about finding a crack in his armor, not to fix him, but to remind him that a crack even exists. Otherwise, this thread will stretch after you forever. Can't you feel it? He's somehow connected to your contract." Mark closed his eyes, listening to his inner sensations. Yes, there was a connection, not personal, but typological. This man was his shadow, an example of what he himself could have become, had he once chosen not connection, but strength or freedom and failed to cope with them. His duty as a conduit was to try to heal this connection, this rupture in the very fabric that he felt. He realized that this was his next, most terrifying test, to meet this man, not as a teacher, but as a reflection, as a reminder of another path. And he felt that without Lika, without her faith and her love, he wouldn't have the strength for it. Their romance had become not just a line in the plot. It had become the support on which his entire mission as a conduit rested, and he realized with horror that the upcoming meeting could subject this support to an unimaginable test. After all, that man was a walking emanation of everything that could destroy connection: hatred, resentment, and pride. Excellent. This is a key moment to show the magic and power of the new contract. Let's reveal this through real, tangible changes in Mark's life. Chapter 7. Synchronicity and flow. Mark's life began to change not in jerks, but like a river finding a new channel smoothly, inexorably, and with increasing force. His connection contract worked like a powerful magnet, rearranging reality around him. 1. Work. The blueprints he made acquired a strange, almost animate harmony. He intuitively found the most elegant and economical solutions, as if feeling the tension in future structures. His boss, who had previously been cool towards him, now looked at him with superstitious respect. Mark wasn't just designing buildings, he felt how they would live, and built something more than just reinforced concrete into the projects. He received one important order in the most incredible way. The client, a man with a heavy gaze, came to a meeting, and Mark, barely greeting him, felt his deep pain not about work but personal, related to a loss. Instead of discussing the estimate, Mark said, "I feel you don't just need a building, you need a place that will heal." The client froze and a moment later burst into tears right in the office. It turned out he was building a clinic in memory of his deceased daughter. The contract was signed without further words. 2. Environment. The chaotic noise of others' emotions gradually turned into a manageable symphony orchestra. Mark learned not to block it, but to conduct it. In a packed metro car, he could mentally send an impulsive calm into the most nervous node of the car, and within minutes, quarreling passengers would inexplicably fall silent, and a crying child would calm down. Street dogs, sensing his non-judgmental acceptance, would follow him, wagging their tails, and then run away, carrying a drop of his harmony with them. The world was responding. 3. Finances. Money, always a problem before, began flowing to him in strange, roundabout ways. He didn't get a raise, but he steadily won small sums in lotteries, found bills on the street, received unexpected bonuses, or old, forgotten debts were simply returned to him. It wasn't enrichment, it was the generosity of the universe responding to his correct internal state. He had exactly enough for what he needed, including renting a more spacious apartment for himself and Lika. 4. Miracles of synchronicity. This became the most astonishing thing. Reality began to play along with him. He would think of a book he needed and it would catch his eye in a second-hand bookstore. He needed specific advice on energy practices, and the next day, an old man would accidentally enter his life in the park, who turned out to be a Qigong master and immediately saw him as awakened. He was thinking about how best to help Artem, and a documentary would air on TV about a martial arts master who spoke exactly about what was needed. Strength is not in breaking a board. Strength is in holding a butterfly in your palm without damaging its wings. Chapter 8. The alchemy of a pair to conduits with Lika. Their relationship grew into something more than just a romance or a student-teacher dynamic. They became a single organism, two poles of one magnet. Their joint practices began to work wonders, healing space. They would visit acquaintances, and after a couple of hours, they would say, "It's so calm in your apartment, like in a temple." They weren't doing anything special, just being there, and their shared field of harmony displaced stagnant energy. Remote connection. Mark at work could mentally send her an image of support, and she, at home, would immediately receive it, feel a surge of strength, and call him saying, "Thanks, I was just getting nervous at that moment." Amplification of the gift. When they meditated together, holding hands, their reception radius increased many times over. They could, without agreeing, simultaneously tune into a lonely person several blocks away and send them a wave of silent support. They didn't know if it helped, but they felt the other's loneliness recede slightly. One evening, lying in each other's arms in bed, Lika whispered, "Do you remember how afraid I was of my gift? Now I understand. It wasn't a finished tool, it was clay. And our love, our union, is the kiln where this clay is fired and becomes something strong, beautiful." Mark held her tighter. She was his greatest miracle, his living, breathing connection, which gave him the strength to be a conduit for the others. It was this growing power and harmony that allowed them not to break when that very man, the walking emanation of severed connections they had seen in the mall, decisively burst into their lives. His name was Victor, and he came not for help. He came with an accusation. He appeared on the threshold of their new apartment on a rainy evening. His face was pale, and his eyes burned with a gloomy fire. Mark Volkov. His voice was low and vibrating, like a string. "We need to talk. Strange things have started happening to me since the day I saw you, and I feel it's somehow connected to you." Mark and Lika exchanged glances. The trial was beginning. Their quiet, harmonious life was coming to an end. The real work of conduits was beginning work with the most intractable, most poisonous matter, a soul that had been accumulating hatred for decades and refusing any connection. Excellent. Let's continue deepening the conflict and revealing Victor's story. Chapter 9. A guest from a past contract. Victor stood in the doorway like a ghost, bringing with him the smell of wet clothes, old tobacco, and something acrid psychic decay. His energy slammed into the cozy field of their apartment like an armor-piercing shell. Lika involuntarily recoiled, feeling the physical impact. Mark, on the contrary, took a step forward, taking the blow upon himself. He was the anchor. "Come in," Mark said, his voice calm, but everything inside him was clenched. Victor crossed the threshold, his gaze sliding over the spacious, bright room over Lika, and a flicker of something like contempt mixed with envy passed through his eyes. "Set yourselves up nicely," he sneered, not offering a hand. He sat down in an armchair, placing his wet boots on the clean floor. Lika barely restrained an impulse to say something, but Mark mentally sent her an impulse. "Wait, observe. What kind of strange things?" Mark asked, sitting opposite. "Dreams," Victor exhaled, staring into emptiness. "The same dream. I'm in some white room, and their voice, it says I didn't fulfill something important. And then I see you. Vaguely at first, yesterday clearly, and today at work." He laughed, shortly and dryly, soundlessly. "I almost killed a man. Can you imagine? Viktor Semyonov, head of security, veteran, and suddenly out of the blue. He looked at Mark, and his gaze held not just anger now, but animal fear. Who are you, and what have you done to me? Mark closed his eyes for a second, allowing himself to sink into Victor's energy stream. It was like descending into a musty, dark well, at the bottom of which a coal of old, unbearable pain smoldered. He saw fragments. A young Victor, an athlete, a promise made to someone and betrayal, cowardice at the decisive moment, and the subsequent decision to lock himself forever in the armor of cynicism and strength, so as never to feel that pain again. I haven't done anything to you, Viktor Semyonovich, Mark said quietly, opening his eyes. You did it to yourself many years ago, and I'm just living my life, and my life, apparently, has become the key that started unlocking your old locks. What locks? What are you talking about? Victor jumped up, his face contorted in a grimace. Lika instinctively stood between him and Mark. About that promise you broke, Mark continued, not looking away. He didn't know the details, but he felt the essence. You ran away then, not from the enemy, but from yourself. And since then, you've carried that coward inside you, hating him with all your soul. But hatred for a part of yourself is a slow poison. It poisons everything. Victor froze. It seemed he was about to explode. But instead, a strange, stifled moan escaped his chest. He collapsed back into the armchair, and his powerful body suddenly shrank. Sergei, he whispered, and the name sounded like a confession. I was supposed to back him up on those exercises, but I got scared. He felt I could have saved him, but I froze, like a post. There were no tears. They seemed to have dried up in him many years ago, but the pain he released filled the room, thick and sticky like tar. Chapter 10. The first session for the next few weeks, their life turned into a strange ritual. Victor came every evening. He didn't ask for help directly. He simply came and sat in silence, pouring his poisonous energy into the space. Mark and Lika worked with him as with a living, energetic scar. They didn't try to heal him. They simply created a space. Mark, as the stronger one, took the main blow of his rage and guilt, transforming it through his own calm. Lika, as a subtle instrument, tuned into those rare moments when his armor cracked and sent droplets of compassion. Into those cracks, not pity, but simple human understanding. It was the hardest work of all. Artem with his rage was a child compared to Victor. It was the work of a sapper diffusing a bomb that could go off at any moment. But the miracles of their contract worked here too. One day Mark, trying to find a way to reach him, mentally asked, "Show me what he needs to see." The next day Victor came with a stunned look. "You won't believe it," he said, for the first time without his usual aggression. "Yesterday evening I was walking in the park. An old man was sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons. He came up to me and said, 'Son, forgiving yourself doesn't mean forgetting. It means stopping carrying a dead man inside you. Bury him, finally, and move on,' and he left, like through the earth." Mark and Lika exchanged glances. Synchronicity. Another week later, Victor, during one of their sessions, suddenly started talking about Sergei not as a ghost but as a person, about how funny he was, how he made everyone in the barracks laugh. And for the first time, his eyes became moist. It was a breakthrough, not a healing. No, the wound was too deep, but it was the beginning of the process. The pus had come out. Now the long and difficult work of cleansing lay ahead. One evening, after Victor left, Lika hugged Mark. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "His pain is so huge, it could consume us." "It won't consume us," Mark pressed her to himself, feeling their shared field of light repelling the remnants of darkness brought by Victor. "Because we are not one. We are connection, and our connection is stronger than his rupture." He looked out the window at the night city, shining with billions of lights, billions of threads, billions of contracts. He was just one of many conduits, but he was not alone, and therein lay his strength and his main miracle. Excellent. Let's continue deepening Victor's story and taking the plot to a new level. Chapter 11. The price of connection. Working with Victor was like performing the most delicate surgical operation on a soul. Each session drained Mark and Lika to the limit. After Victor left, a heavy, Swedish putrid smell of someone else's pain hung in the apartment for several hours, intangible but palpable to their heightened perception. One night, Mark woke up from his own scream. He had dreamed that he was Victor. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, and from the darkness, the eyes of his dead friend Sergei were looking at him, not with reproach, but with infinite sadness. And then the cliff began to crumble, and Mark Victor fell into a black abyss, and the fall lasted forever. Lika was already awake, sitting next to him, her palms softly resting on his damp forehead. "That's his pain," she whispered. "It's seeping into you. You're taking on too much." "How else?" Mark's voice broke. "He can't handle this alone. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline." "Maybe we don't need to put out the fire," Lika said thoughtfully. "Maybe we just need to sit with him in that fire until it burns itself out." She was right. Mark, in his striving to conduct and transform, had taken on the role of a lightning rod. But a lightning rod takes the strike upon itself. He realized that his task was not to be a shield, but to be a mirror in which Victor could finally see his true self, not a monster, but a wounded man. At the next session, Mark changed tactics. When Victor, clenching his fists, began his usual monologue about his own worthlessness, Mark did not absorb this energy. Instead, he looked Victor straight in the eyes and said, "You hate that guy who froze in fear back then, but what have you done to help him?" Victor was taken aback. "What? I hate him. Everyday hatred is not help." Mark interrupted him softly. "It's torture. You keep that young soldier in the basement of your own soul and beat him every day, and then you're surprised why it smells of rot down there." A deathly silence hung in the room. Lika held her breath, expecting an explosion, but no explosion followed. Victor looked at Mark with such bewilderment, as if he were speaking an unknown language. What was I supposed to do?" he asked quietly, like a child. "Forgive him," said Mark. "Not justify. Simply acknowledge that he was a frightened boy who made a mistake, and let him go. Finally let him die in peace, and yourself live on." Tears, which had been absent for decades, streamed down Victor's cheeks. They were quiet, without sobs. He wasn't crying about Sergei at that moment. He was crying about himself, about that boy whom he had tormented for so long. It was a turning point. Not healing, but a capitulation of the old defense. The armor cracked, and through the crack, vulnerable, living flesh showed. Chapter 12. The call from outside. It was at this moment, when Mark and Lika were focused on their most difficult task, that the universe, as if testing their strength, sent a new challenge, a new threat. Artem brought it. He came to a training session agitated and strangely collected. "Mark, you told me to pay attention to signs," he began, avoiding eye contact. "Well, I was in the old district today, where my old well, you know, and I saw a girl, about 16, sitting on a bench by the entrance, and around her such darkness, bro. Worse than my boss at his worst. And she is drawing, and around her in the air, these blots are just hanging black and sticky." Mark became alert. Lika, who had been listening by the door, entered the room. "What's so special about that?" "Lots of sad teenagers," said Mark. "What's special?" Artem looked at him directly, and his eyes held not fear, but determination. "Is that when I looked at her, it suddenly became quiet in my head. All my crap, all those angry thoughts blown away like by the wind. And I felt clarity, and one single impulse. Bring her to the conduit." A light shiver ran down Mark's spine. This was not just a social impulse. This was a call, just like Lika had found him herself. "Do you remember where she was?" "Of course," Artem nodded. "I walked her home, just in case. She didn't even notice me, like she was looking right through me." Mark looked at Lika. She read the question in his eyes and nodded. "I'm with you." They left Victor, who was too absorbed in his own catharsis, and went with Artem. On the way, Mark felt a strange pressure building. It was like an approaching thunderstorm. But the storm was not in the sky, but in the subtle world. Some incredibly powerful, distorted, and lonely soul loomed on the horizon of his perception. They drove up to a Khrushchevka in a residential district. Artem pointed to a bench by the third entrance. It was empty. "Seems we're late," Artem said disappointedly, but Mark shook his head. He approached the bench and ran his hand over the seat. The air there was icy and thick, as if saturated with black ink. "No," he said quietly, "we are not late. She just left the door open." He raised his gaze to the windows of the 5-story building. His eyes fell on one of them, on the 4th floor, a dusty pane behind which, he knew, was hidden not just a sad girl. Through the thin veil of reality, he glimpsed the same symbol that was on his contract's 3 intersecting circles. But one of them was not just filled, as in the message he had received at the end of his previous light. It was black as coal and seemed to absorb all the surrounding light. His connection contract had led him to a new task, and Mark realized with horror and anticipation that this student would be like neither Lika, nor Artem, nor even Victor. This was a Void Weaver. Excellent. Let's continue deepening the mystery and fantasy. Chapter 13. The Void Weaver. For the next few days, Mark tried to feel the girl from a distance, but every time his consciousness approached that house, it ran into an absolute void. Not a defense, not a barrier, but a vacuum, as if a black hole existed in that spot in the world, sucking in any intention, any energy. It was frightening. She doesn't just block, he shared with Lika over dinner. She absorbs my inquiry, my curiosity, everything just disappears, not reaching her. I feel neither her pain nor her thoughts. Nothing. Maybe she's just a strong screener. Like you taught me, Lika suggested no. Screening is when you repel the signal. Here, it falls into nowhere. Artem was right. Around her is not darkness. It's the absence of anything. They decided to act the old-fashioned way. The next day, Mark, Lika, and Artem set up surveillance on the entrance. They sat in a car across the street, and Mark continued to scan the area, trying to find any clue. He was the first to see her. She came out of the entrance in the evening, thin in a dark hoodie with a tablet under her arm. Her face was pale and completely detached, and again the same effect. When Mark tried to feel her, his inner vision bumped into a black, starless cosmos. Nothing emanated from her, not a single emotion. She was a living zero. God, Lika whispered, pressing against the window. She's like a ghost. I don't feel anything at all. I'll go, Artem said decisively and got out of the car without waiting for an answer. They watched as he said something to her. The girl stopped and raised her eyes to him. They were huge and empty, like a lake on a moonless night. She didn't answer, just stood and looked. Artem spoke for another minute, then turned and walked back. His shoulders were tense. Nothing, he reported, getting back in the car. Said I found her drawing that she dropped a lie and wanted to return it. She looked at me like I was dust. Not rudely, just like I don't exist. And that's it. Then she just walked on. Mark watched the receding figure. Everything inside him screamed danger. This was not just a difficult soul. This was something violating the very laws of energy exchange. His connection contract was colliding with its complete opposite something that denied the very possibility of connection. She needs to be stopped, Artem said unexpectedly. There was no malice in his voice, only a cold statement of fact. I don't know what she is, but she's a dead zone. Everything goes out near her. We can't stop a person just for being different, Lika objected, but uncertainty was audible in her voice. This isn't different, Lika, Mark said quietly, not taking his eyes off the spot where the girl had disappeared. This is a hole in reality, and if a hole isn't patched, it will grow. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. A message came from an unknown number. There was no text, only an image. The same symbol of 3 intersecting circles, but this time all 3 circles were filled with a dense, absolute blackness, and beneath it a single phrase, Void Weaver activated. Stop her before she becomes irreversible. Your next contract depends on this. Mark slowly showed the phone to Lika and Artem. A heavy silence fell in the car. Their mission had suddenly turned from a healing and pedagogical one into a hunt, or a rescue. They didn't yet know whom they were supposed to save, the girl from the world, or the world from the girl. All right, Artem exhaled, clenching his fists. What do we do, boss? Mark looked at the darkening sky, then at the entrance where their new target lived. First, we need to understand what she is, and for that we need to talk to someone who knows more about contracts than we do. He looked at Lika. Get ready. We'll need your gift again. But this time we won't be looking for a person. We'll be looking for the Keeper. His words hung in the air, reminding them that behind the thin veil of their reality lurked forces for whom their personal dramas were merely lines in an endless report. The game was moving to a completely new, frightening level. Excellent. Let's continue, raising the stakes and deepening the mystical component. Chapter 14. In search of the Keeper, the idea of finding the Keeper seemed like madness. How do you find a librarian in an infinite library without knowing the book's title? or even the floor, but Mark felt the key was in Lika. Her gift, heightened by their connection and work with Victor, had evolved. She was learning to tune in not to thoughts, but to subtler matters, to patterns, archetypes, the very fabric of reality. They set up an impromptu session in the center of the apartment, turning off the lights and lighting a single candle. Artem stood guard at the door, his task to anchor them with his powerful presence, preventing them from completely slipping into the unknown. Victor, whom they had begun to treat as a fragile but valuable ally, sat in a corner, watching with a silent question in his eyes. He wasn't ready for such depths yet, but his simple human presence, now devoid of destructive hatred, added stability to the room. Mark and Lika sat facing each other, their palms crossed. "Don't look for him himself," Mark instructed. "Look for the sensation, that whiteness, the silence smelling of eternity. Remember how I told you?" Lika nodded, closing her eyes. Her breathing became slow and deep. Mark felt her consciousness, like tendrils of light, begin to probe the space around, filtering out the city noise, mundane thoughts, the emotional vibrations of neighbors. She was looking for emptiness, not the dead emptiness of the Void Weaver, but the saturated, living emptiness of the Antechamber. Minutes passed, feeling like hours. Lika grew pale, sweat beaded on her forehead. Artem shifted nervously from foot to foot. "Nothing," she whispered. "Solid noise." Millions of voices move away from the voices, Mark said quietly, becoming her conduit. "Go deeper, to the blueprints, to the rules. Look for the architecture of this world." Lika shuddered. She exhaled. "There is something ordered, like a grid, like endless shelves. I feel a reference. Need to ask a question." "Ask about the Void Weaver," Mark said immediately. Lika squeezed his hands so hard his bones creaked, her face contorted with strain. He doesn't answer. "But I see lines, like in your contract. Burning an error. Protocol 7G-83. Anomaly. Rejection of contract hope. Activation of side effect energetic vacuum. Further." "Can't," she groaned. "Too heavy." Suddenly, the candle on the table went out, though there was no draft in the room. The air became thick and cold, and in the center of the room, a few steps from them, a translucent figure began to manifest from nothing. It was not the Keeper. It was his shadow, a hologram, a projection. The same ivory-colored suit, the same unreadable features, but the voice that sounded was lifeless, like an automaton's. "Query accepted. Anomaly Void Weaver registered, providing reference information." The figure turned to Mark, and its soulless eyes stared at him. "Conduit Mark. The anomaly is the result of a system failure. The soul bearer rejected its primary contract before its completion. Instead of integration of the chosen quality, a rupture occurred, creating a stable absorption phenomenon. The anomaly is progressing. Without intervention, it will lead to a local collapse of reality within its radius of influence. How to stop it?" Mark exhaled. "Standard protocol provides for isolation and disposal of the anomaly." The hologram replied indifferently. "No," Lika said sharply, opening her eyes. "She's a girl. You can't dispose of her." The hologram turned to her. "Alternative protocol. Rehabilitation. Requires restoration of the ruptured contract. Success probability 0.8%. Risk. Assimilation of the conduit by the anomaly. How to restore the contract?" Mark insisted. "It is necessary to establish a connection with the anomaly's core, bypassing the vacuum effect. Deliver the original impulse hope in its pure form. Warning. Direct exposure will lead to energy loss and possible loss of your own contract." The hologram began to flicker. Communication session concluded. "Good luck, conduit." The figure dissolved. The candle on the table lit itself again. A stunned silence hung in the room. Artem was the first to break it. "So, in short, we need to approach this black hole in the shape of a girl and stick a piece of hope into it. Otherwise, she'll suck in the whole neighborhood, and us, it turns out, will be sent for disposal. Is that right?" Mark nodded slowly, looking at his hands. His connection contract was leading him to the very edge. To save one soul and a piece of reality, he had to risk everything he had gained. He looked at Lika, at Artem, at Victor. Connection is not only about light and joy. It is about the willingness to give a part of oneself so that the whole may remain alive. "That's right," Mark said quietly. "We prepare. Tomorrow we go to her." "Excellent. Let's continue building up the tension." Chapter 15. On the threshold of the void, the preparation resembled preparations for a spacewalk into open space, where instead of a vacuum, there was an absolute energetic nothingness. They spent the whole evening trying to understand how one could deliver the impulse hope in its pure form. It's not just a positive thought, Licca reasoned, pacing the room. Her contract was rejected. That means she didn't just fail to fulfill it, she rejected it, spat it out, like contaminated food. Any falsity, any strained smile will be immediately discarded. We must not speak of hope, Mark said, looking at the candle flame. We must be it, at the very moment of contact. Radiate it as naturally as breathing. But how to do that when she's sucking everything out of you? It was Victor, who had been silent until then, who unexpectedly spoke. Armor. Everyone looked at him. When I was in my armor, he spoke slowly, choosing his words. I couldn't be penetrated by pity or persuasion. But that old man in the park, he didn't try to penetrate me. His words passed through. Because he was whole. He wanted nothing from me. He simply was who he was. Maybe you need not to attack her with hope, but simply to be it next to her, like a lighthouse, without trying to illuminate her herself. Mark looked at Victor in amazement. He who had himself been a walking fortress was now suggesting the key to another fortress. He's right, Licca said. We cannot force her to accept hope. We can only offer her evidence that it still exists, like a sample of clean air for a person who has been breathing poison for decades. The plan was insane and simple. They would not try to heal her. They would simply approach her altogether. Mark, as the conduit, would focus on radiating a pure, unconditional state of hope, not as an expectation of a miracle, but as an inner confidence in the fundamental goodness of being. Licca would be a stabilizer, amplifying this state and protecting his own field from decay. Arten the anchor with his raw physical strength and will, holding them in reality so they themselves wouldn't be carried away into the energetic vortex. And Victor would be living proof that even the most petrified soul could take a step towards the light. The next morning, they were back at the same entrance. The weather was overcast, gray, making the girl sitting on the bench with her tablet seem even more ghostly. She was drawing something, and Mark noticed that the grass around the bench was withered and gray, as if scorched, while everything around was green. They approached, all together, not hiding. The girl raised her empty gaze to them. The effect was instantaneous. Mark felt strength beginning to be drawn out of him, not painfully, but as if a tap had been opened. His confidence, his calm, his hope, everything began to slowly drain into this black hole. Stop, he mentally commanded himself and focused his will on an image on the first morning with Licca, on Victor's tears, on Artem's overcoming, on the small miracles his contract had given him. He wasn't trying to give this to her. He was simply reminding himself that all this was real. Licca grabbed his hand, and her energy, pure and refined, flowed into him like fresh blood. Artem stood behind, placing his heavy palms on their shoulders, grounding them, tying them to the earth. The girl stopped drawing. She looked at them, and something flickered in her empty eyes. Not understanding, but surprise. She felt that something was there, something that didn't disappear like everything else. And then Victor, without a word, took a step forward. He looked at the girl, and in his eyes, once just as scorched, there was now only quiet sadness and acceptance. I was like you, he said simply. His voice was quiet, but it sounded like a thunderclap in the ensuing silence. I thought it was all over, that I was a mistake. But it turned out not to be so. He wasn't offering her hope. He was simply stating the fact of his existence beyond despair. At that moment, Mark, using this breach, this fleeting surprise, did what he wasn't even sure he was capable of. He didn't send her an impulse. He opened up. He allowed her for a moment to see and feel that very antechamber, infinite and full of meaning. He showed her not hope as an abstraction, but hope as a fundamental law of the universe, in which even a broken contract is not the end, but merely a complex task. The girl gasped. Her tablet fell from her hands. She recoiled, pressing against the back of the bench, and for the first time, her face was distorted not by emptiness, but by living, genuine pain. The pain of realization. Go away, she whispered, and her voice was hoarse and used. Please go away. I don't want to eat you. And then they all felt it. The vacuum surrounding her wavered. On its edge, for a second, the thinnest, barely visible film appeared weak, distorted, but a real connection. It wasn't directed at them. It stretched somewhere deep inside herself, to that very core that had once chosen the word hope. They did not heal her. but they showed her the door, and most importantly, they proved that the door still existed. Retreating, Mark felt a terrible fatigue. He had given too much, but he also felt something else. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He didn't look. He already knew what would be there. A new symbol, 3 intersecting circles, and one of them, the one that had been black, was now not just Phil. A tiny but indomitable point of light had ignited in its center. Excellent. Let's finish this part with a powerful, multi-layered chapter that draws a line under the first major arc and opens the door to the future. Chapter 16. The source of a new river, they returned to the apartment in silence, like soldiers after a battle that had been neither won nor lost. The effect of the encounter with the Void Weaver was strange and not instantaneous. Mark fell into sleep as into a black pit and slept for almost 24 hours. His own connection contract was drained to the bottom like a muscle torn by an unbearable weight. Lika did not leave his side, placing a chair next to the bed, holding his hand, and unconsciously sharing her energy with him like an drip. Artem, usually restless, sat in the kitchen and silently peeled an orange. His own rage, confronted with the absolute nothingness of the Void Weaver, now seemed to him a childish toy. He had seen a real abyss, and it made him reevaluate his whole life. Victor was the calmest. He silently cooked soup for everyone, tidied the apartment. His movements had a new, acquired firmness. By witnessing another's fall, he had finally affirmed his own decision to live. Mark's awakening was difficult. He opened his eyes and saw Lika's face, her dark circles under the eyes, but also bottomless relief in them. "You're back," she whispered. He nodded, finding it hard to speak. He felt turned inside out, empty. But in this emptiness, there was no despair. There was silence. The silence after long work. A week passed, strength slowly returned, and with it came an understanding of what they had actually done. The miracles they had worked were not loud, but fundamental. 1. The Void Weaver. They didn't see her again. But one evening, Mark, stepping onto the balcony, felt a weak but pure impulse from that very house. It wasn't hope, it was curiosity, a yearning for something. The vacuum was no longer absolute. She had begun, with the incredible speed of an infant, to learn to feel anew. They had not healed her, they had given her a tool for self-salvation. 2. Their own group. Artem, Victor, Lika, and he. They were no longer teacher and students. They had become a coven, a gang, a family, assembled not by blood, but by the choice of the soul and jointly shed sweat. Victor, the former walking nightmare, was now their guardian and, strangely enough, a wise advisor. Artem was turning from a huge child into a responsible warrior. Lika was his heart and his shield. 3. Synchronicities. They did not cease but changed their character. If before the universe tossed them random luck and encounters, now it seemed to trust them. A new intern came to Mark's work, a shy young man from whom emanated a familiar energetic trace of an unfulfilled contract. An article in the newspaper caught his eye about scientific research in the depths of the sea, and Mark suddenly clearly understood that their next assignment would be connected with water. Reality was not just helping them, it was beginning to cooperate with them. One evening, they all gathered in the living room. No one was meditating or practicing. They were simply drinking tea bought by Victor, expensive, bitter, real. And what now? Artem asked, flexing his shoulder. Do we wait for the next letter with 3 little circles? No, Mark said quietly. He looked at the fireplace flames. They had found an apartment with a fireplace. Another coincidence. There will be no letter. We are no longer trainees carrying out assignments. We are contractors. We see the work ourselves and do it. He looked at each of them. The Void Weaver was the first truly big job, correcting someone else's fundamental system error. There will be many like her. Those who broke, those whom the system was ready to dispose of. Our task is to find them and give them a second chance. Sounds like a job for all eternity, Victor remarked, but there was no fatigue in his voice, only agreement. That's how it is, Mark smiled. For the first time in a long while, his smile was light. He had found his place in infinity. He was a conduit. He was connection. He took Lika's hand, and their fingers interlaced. Artem nodded, clenching his huge fist and then unclenching it, and Victor snorted approvingly. Outside, it was getting dark. The fire burned in the fireplace. In the quiet, warm room sat for people whose souls had once been torn, lost, and lonely. Now they were whole. Now they were together. And somewhere in the darkness, among the billions of city lights, another one was igniting weak, but no longer lonely. Their work was only just beginning. End of Book 1.